For our first congregant who will speak, I'd like to invite Rick Landman to share some words.
Grüß Gott. I can still remember the blackout. I'm leaving the mask on. Well, then the microphone is contaminated. Anyway, in 1965, on November 9th, was the blackout in New York City. And I clearly remember worrying how my father, who worked in the fur business right behind this building on 29th Street, was going to get home. But I had no idea what Kristallnacht was and did not know that my father, when he was 18, and his father were part of those Jews arrested the day after Kristallnacht. But about 2 years later, at lunchtime, I'm walking up 7th Avenue right here, and a tall man walks by, and my father goes, "Oh my God, Ricky, hurry up." And he runs up to this man and touches him on the shoulder and turns around and in German says to him, "For you in Dachau the night after Kristallnacht?" The man looks down and says to my father, "Ja." "Do you remember the little boy they put up against the wall to be shot? But they didn't shoot him. And he started walking backwards. And you grabbed him, pulled him behind you, so that you were on the row of people?" And the guy said, "Was that you?" My father says, "Yes. And I always wanted to thank you. But they wouldn't let us talk." I'm sitting there, I can still remember it. Totally crying. And I said, "Daddy, you didn't take his name, you didn't take his phone number?" He goes, "Ricky, I do not want to remember that night. He doesn't want to remember that night. And we are not going to speak about it again." And it wasn't until the 1980s, when they became Holocaust survivors instead of refugees, that we began talking about this. And at CBST in 1990, we are probably the only synagogue that every year remembers the night of Kristallnacht. And I invited my father to come in 92. He was the first speaker that we had here. And one of the things that I want to leave you with is the lessons that he taught me. Now, after World War I, Hitler started with the big lie that the German military won World War I. It was the Jews and the politicians that made them lose the war. And the Christians couldn't have Jesus being Jewish. Jesus became an Aryan, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan. The big lies were the first things that started. Then came the thugs and the insurrection, the putsch. And what people don't know, German Jews only got their rights in 1871. Pretty similar between our civil rights movement and today was between 1871 and 1933. But then the Jews lost all of their rights once the electoral process allowed Hitler and the Nazis to get in, and he could change the Reichstag and he could change the judges. It legally became the law that in 1935, all Jews, no matter if you fought in World War I and you lived there for hundreds of years, you are now an illegal alien living in Germany and you should get out. The next year, Himmler started the Committee to Combat Homosexuality and Abortion. Does any of this sound familiar to people? But it wasn't until 1938 in Kristallnacht when my father said, "Ricky, up until now we could take it. But when they picked me up that morning, and I walked by the synagogue, and it was on fire, and the businesses were all broken, and they're putting me in jail and then sent me to Dachau with my father. Who could we turn to? We couldn't yell to our neighbors for help or the police for help. They were the ones that were doing it. It was a totally different situation. And when you leave, you can look. I have all of the flyers outside from our programs, and I have my father gave in Germany the 50th anniversary Kristallnacht speech, and I translated it in English. At the end, he wrote, "Beware, this can happen again too." So what I want to leave you with is that Tuesday is election day. We have to fight for our democracy, to expand our civil rights, to appreciate the value of diversity, so that hopefully we don't have to go through this type of era again. Good Shabbos.